Hello? Hi, Kim. There we go. Hi. Hello.
Change my background.
Hi.
Excellent. Okay. There's Amy. Great. Oh, Scott, you've got a new background.
Yes, it's my magical den.
Very nice.
And your appropriate shirt.
Yes.
Great. Just waiting for Jane. She's texting me right now. We'll see.
I'll try not to do one of these. And here's my beloved book, River City.
If you want to hold up your books, that would, feel free. A few of the other authors did that.
Magic.
Yeah, it does look weird with the green screen.
Here.
It's working, yay. Oh shoot, and it's not letting me do the background. Hold on.
Yeah, you gotta reset it. I had to redo mine when I came in.
Each time you have to? Okay. Okay. Preferences. Does it not know what a Luddite I am?
So is everyone else in California except for Angel?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Texas not here.
Yeah. Okay, it's not happening.
Can we get by with just your
It's
house?
fine. It's fine, yeah, I don't care.
It looks clean. Looks
Yeah.
good. Okay, I'm going to sign off and then I'll make it live.
You'll lurk in the background?
I will be lurking, yes, in the background. Okay. Have a great show, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now we are broadcasting to all attendees. Awesome. Well, it is 7:01, so I am just going to get started, I think. My name is Jane Ganal. I'm the co-founder of Litquake, which has now been going on for 20 years. And we had something interesting happen this spring, which was that we had 5 events planned for April and May that were suddenly no longer happening. So we decided, in addition to putting those events online, we would add some other events online. And so we came up with the concept of Litquake on Lockdown, which is basically a virtual series. It's this is our 5th night, and we're going to run every night at 7 p.m. until through April 10th. So thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's event is called Met Cute, the happy side of gay romance. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And by the way, as of now, we are still planning to do our live festival, which happens in the fall, October 8th through 17th. Live and in person on stages throughout the Bay Area. At least that is our plan at this time. And of course, we will pivot if we have to. Quick order of business. It would be great to help support both Litquake and the participants tonight by donating at litquake.org, as well as on Venmo, which is at Litquake on Venmo. All proceeds will be split between the participants and Litquake. As we all know, the Bay Area was already a very financially challenging place for creative people to live and work. So with things the way they are now, it certainly has not made it any easier. So we appreciate any support you can give us. You can also support the participants tonight by purchasing books at bookshop.org, bookshop.org, which gives back to independent bookstores in the Bay Area or wherever the participant lives. So without further ado, let us get on with the show. I'm going to introduce Kim Fielding, who is the author who presented us with this wonderful idea. She is the best-selling author of, I think, 26 books. Is that correct, Kim?
Yep.
Crazy. Especially male-to-male romance novels, novellas, and short stories. Having migrated back and forth across the western two-thirds of the United States, she now lives in the Central Valley somewhere. She's mysterious about where she actually lives. She has a day job as a professor, but escapes as often as possible to travel. Tonight, she has teamed up with 3 other authors, J. Scott Coatsworth, Angel Martinez, and Amy Lane, to do a group reading of their work. Kim, Scott, and Amy all live in the Central Valley, while Angel is joining us from the East Coast. It's 10 p.m. there. Hats off to you for staying up late. They're going to read a scene, each of them, from one of their books. And after that, they'll have a discussion about the value of romance during trying times. And I just want to add that as we were going through the submissions for this series, there were so many of them that were about feeling imprisoned or trying to reach out and social isolation and things like that. And then we came across this one and I thought, we have to have it. It's a wonderful, upbeat, shot in the arm, and we all need that right now. So thank you for proposing it. And with that, I will let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Jane.
Sure.
And I'm glad you said that, because that was kind of our guiding point too, is that, romance in general gives hope. And that's, I think, one of the really great points about it as a genre. So thank you for letting us read today. We're really excited about it. And we're all going to be reading from some of our lighter stuff, because that's the mood I think everybody's in right now. So I'm going to be reading from this book, which it's called Redesigning Landry Bishop. It's a very kind of light, tropey story. And you don't need to know much about it other than Landry lives in Los Angeles. He's originally from a small town in Nebraska. He lives in LA, and he is kind of like a Martha Stewart, or like all the Queer Eye guys in one. He's a minor celebrity, and he's widowed, and his personal assistant has recently left to go take care of her parents in Hawaii. He's hired a new personal assistant named Jordan, and there's some, kind of sparks flying between Landry and Jordan. So this particular scene takes place as Landry and Jordan are in Las Vegas with adjoining hotel rooms, and they've kissed a couple of times, and Landry's just not too sure about it. With mixed relief and guilt, he reached for his phone. "Can we talk?" he texted. He waited 3 eternities for Elaine to text back, and then he breathed a huge sigh at her response. "Sure, call me." He considered FaceTiming her, but he knew his hair must resemble a fright wig. Also, she'd noticed the shirt he was wearing, and she'd know it wasn't his, which would complicate things further. He opted for a regular phone call. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked. "No. I'm in the middle of a hard session of lanai sitting." "Mai Tai in hand?" She laughed. "Not tonight. Mom and Dad went out to play mahjong and turned in as soon as they got home. I'm feeling naturally relaxed. Alcohol not needed. But what's wrong? And why are you whispering?" Damn. Of course she'd notice that. "I don't want him to hear me." "Who? Are you being held hostage in a car trunk? Because then you should have called 911 and not me." Hilarious. "I'm in a hotel suite in Las Vegas. Jordan's in the room next door." "Is he now? What's that supposed to mean?" "Landry, what's your crisis?" He flopped back against the pillows. "I'm not even sure. My head's a mess." I always thought you were relatively sane for a guy who lives in LA. You don't go around telling everyone vaccines are part of a conspiracy between extraterrestrials and the Illuminati, and you're not wearing anyone's placenta as jewelry. Her words comforted him, mostly because he knew plenty of people who did those things. Compared to that, angsting over his love life was incredibly normal. Thank you. You've helped already. What other precious drops of wisdom can I bestow? I can't even explain this. He thumped his forehead a few times with the heel of his free hand. It didn't help. Jordan. He's not working out for you? No, he's great. He picks things up really quickly and he's completely dedicated to me. That doesn't sound like a problem. Landry dropped his voice even more. He's too dedicated. Meaning? He has this theory about people clicking. Oh yeah, his parents. It's part of the official family lore. Relieved he didn't have to explain, Landry nodded in the darkness. He thinks he's clicked with me. Is that what the kids are calling it nowadays? Elaine? He remembered he was supposed to be whispering. We haven't, enjoyed the benefits of physical congress? I get it, Lord Thistlebottom. He could have mentioned the kisses, but they weren't really the point. I don't know what to do about this. Are you into him? Yes. God, yes. He's like digging through a pile of thrift shop knickknacks and discovering an original Henry Moore. Like biting into a dumpling and discovering it's filled with perfectly spiced meat. Like, got it. You're into him. Landry let out a long breath. Yeah. Again, doesn't sound like a problem. You're both single, and he really is a good kid. I'm his boss. Uh-huh. And does that aspect bug him? No, Landry admitted. He promised not to sue. But I guess that's not the real issue anyway. I don't know. Great. Whining was going to solve everything. Did you ever take any psych classes? Elaine asked. I majored in design. We covered the psychology of color. Then no. I did take psych classes, real ones. And one thing I learned is that nobody can be in a healthy relationship until he feels comfortable with who he is by himself. That made perfect sense. If you're planning a meal, you wouldn't choose the right side dishes if you hadn't already decided on a main course. But it didn't apply to him. I was in a healthy relationship, remember? She paused before answering. You were practically a baby when you and Steve met. Your relationship worked really well for the Landry you were then. But what about now? Do you really know who you are? Who you want to be? No, Landry whimpered. So I should stay away from Jordan until I'm done with my pre-midlife crisis? Oh my God, I'm hurtling toward midlife. I think I'm gonna have a panic attack. Focus, Landry. Breathe. What you do with Jordan is up to you. I wouldn't recommend the two of you running off to the chapel tomorrow and getting hitched by Elvis, but that doesn't mean you have to wear hazmat suits around each other. Try out being friends. Maybe even try out being lovers. Just try to make sure neither of you gets hurt. You make it sound so easy. That's my job, making things easier for you. Even still, it felt good to smile. You're the best, Elaine. They spent some time after that chatting about a great beach she'd discovered that week and how she'd been doing aqua aerobics classes. She and her parents were considering repainting the kitchen, so Landry pledged his input if she sent him some photos. He told her about the Las Vegas show with the penis puppets. She laughed herself into a snorting fit. Thanks, Elaine, for being there. I'll always be there for you, Landry, even when I'm far away. And that's it for my reading. And let's see, Angel's going to go next. So I'm going to do a brief intro of Angel. Angel writes science fiction and fantasy of all sorts with queer characters, sometimes funny and sometimes decidedly not. Angel, it's all yours.
And Angel, you have to follow on penis puppets.
Yeah, the penis puppets are a real thing, guys.
This is a hard thing to follow. Really briefly, I'm obviously going to be reading from one of my funnier things. This is from a series called the Brimstone series. And Brimstone is about demons in space. Basically, how can you take that seriously? And the premise is that the Shax, who's the demon prince of thieves, has a major disagreement with the management in hell, has to flee for his life. He steals a spaceship and decides to live as a space pirate. And that's basically what the series is about. He gathers kind of found family along the way. And the series right now is at 6 books. There's a 7th that's almost finished. My editor is about ready to beat me over the head about it, I think. But the other thing that I've done with the Brimstone series is that I have very short flash fiction items that I wrote every Tuesday for the publisher's blog. So they're complete little stories between 1,000, 1,500 words, and that's what I'm going to be reading for you tonight. Is one of those. So this particular story is about 2 years after the very first book in this series, which is Potato Surprise. And the 2 characters that we have in this particular little story is Shax, of course, himself, the demon prince of thieves, and Julian. Julian Parallax is a government assassin, a government secret agent, and it's from his point of view. And we are at the Karnak Casino on Raw Station, which is a very exclusive casino. So here we are. From the Brimstone Journals, this is called Casino and Royalty. What name is the reservation under, sir? Bond. Julian Bond. Julian struggled to keep his expression disinterested, but damn, how he had longed to say those words. Ever since Shax had shown him bids of the old Earth hero, he had indulged gleeful fantasies about being Bond. When the central office had asked if he had a name preference for the assignment, how could he resist? Security, discreet in Major D guise, activated the door lock on the ornately embossed golden scanner pergola and let Julian proceed. That Central had snagged him an invitation here at all was remarkable. That no one questioned him once he was on the guest list was not even slightly shocking. In keeping with the rarefied surroundings, Julian was in formal attire, scarlet frock coat, and ridiculously tight synth silk pants. Minimal ceramic weaponry that the scanners would miss, minimal hidden electronics likewise. Tonight was all about finesse rather than hit hard and run, and the best high-tech security money could buy meant he was on his own, without backup surveillance. He had the means, he had the method. What he didn't have was an exit strategy. Sometimes it was best to delay planning that final piece until one had a feel for the room. The gaming tables gleamed with exotic woods and precious inlays. The staff were all beautiful young people, elegantly uniformed, perfectly coiffed. The guests were a cross-section of every corner of the galaxy's wealthiest excesses, from diamond-encrusted gowns to titanium body enhancements. He accepted a flute of champagne from a lovely in a skin-tight black bodysuit with little silver bells around the waist, then scanned the crowd for a likely companion for the evening. Someone flashy and memorable, so his exit later would be conspicuous. The blonde Amazon with the raucous laugh. Perhaps oh, sweet gods, the heavens had smiled on him. But how had the little brigand managed to get in here? A middle management type bustled up to the casino guest in question. Prince Shax, such a pleasure to have royalty at the Karnak. Please tell us if there's anything we can do for you. Well, that answers that. Julian waited for Shax to turn just a hair and spot him. Then he lifted his glass in salute and appreciation for Shax's evening ensemble. The emerald green pants hugged every luscious bit of Shax's gorgeous legs, and the tails on the suit coat were just short enough to offer hints and peeks at his perfect ass. Shax said something soft and flirty to the casino employee that made him blush and chuckle. With the beautifully executed platform-sold turn, Shax swept the drink off a passing tray and stalked toward Julian. Well, hello there, handsome. Don't I know you? We've met socially. Julian offered a wry smile and extended his hand. Julian Bond, your mother introduced us. Oh, of course. Shax took the offered hand and turned it into an excuse to tuck his hand into Julian's elbow and walk with him. Fancy that. Mother insisted I pay a visit here. Did she now? Julian had just spotted his target at the Argos wheel table. He leaned in to whisper, You fancy being my very visible arm candy this evening? Of course. What do you need me to do? Stay by me and be an attention whore, dear. I just need people watching you. Playing to my strengths. Smart man, Shax murmured. The target wasn't remarkable in any way, average height and weight, middle-aged, except that his understated clothes would have outpriced a small interstellar ship, and his security loomed behind him. Apparently, Shax followed his gaze and took the cue easily. Oh, Argos, Julian, do you mind? I loved this game, so it's so exciting. Julian offered him a tight, indulgent smile. Clear to everyone watching that he was reluctant, but thoroughly invested in the lovely demon prince enjoying himself. Shax maneuvered them over so that Julian was beside the target. To anyone watching, the move made sense, since the only open spot at the table was next to Mr. Expensive Suit. Shax surveyed the table and placed his chip sensors with unholy glee. Blue peacock, gold ships. Shax stretched to reach a betting square in the center for his remaining sensors. 5 blue peacock, almost. Your Highness, Julian said with amusement, as he and everyone around the table watched Shax wriggle his fine little ass as he bent over the table. I could get you a rake to... No, I can do this. I'm not that short. With a last push of his outstretched fingers, Shax reached his chosen square, stood back up and straightened his jacket. His horns sparkled in the lights of the spinning Argos wheel, and Julian's heart cracked all over again at how gorgeous he was. Concentrate. Just get this done. All eyes were on Shax as his biggest wager hit, and he squealed in delight, clapping his hands. Yes? The croupier held the electronic rake out, ready to add the winnings and push them to Shax. Let it ride, my dear. I feel lucky tonight. Shax gave Julian a quick peck on the jaw and returned his attention to the table. 3 spins of the wheel later, through which Shax flirted with everyone at the table, His Highness had quadrupled his winnings, then lost it all. He managed to look incredibly fetching as he turned his face up to Julian, smiled bright, but just a hint wobbly. Ah, well, I never did know when to stop. Julian pulled him into a one-armed hug. Never mind, Highness. Shall we go to dinner? Perfect idea. Shax stood on tiptoe to give him a sizzling kiss. I do hope they have flambe. I like a little heat with my meals. All eyes were on Shax as he glided away from the table on Julian's arm and up the spiral stairs to the 3rd floor. Once they were ensconced in a lovely private room overlooking the casino floor with a bottle of wine and an absolutely exquisite vegetable korma, Shax finally asked, well, did you accomplish whatever it was? Oh, yes, Julian answered, with half an eye on the floor. Mr. Expensive Suit was still at the Argos table, but nothing happened. No explosions, no bloodshed. Shax's disappointed pout was adorable. Keep watching, sweetheart. Any moment now. Right on schedule, Mr. Suit turned purple and toppled like a domino. He hit the absurdly thick casino carpet with a thud, and chaos ensued as his security grabbed hold of the hapless patrons who had been on either side of him, and casino management hurried to the scene. Julian, Jack said softly. We were down there over 45 minutes ago. New topical poison. Takes a bit to take effect. Will have broken down in the bloodstream by the time someone thinks to check. A simple accidental brush of hands. Julian picked up Shax's hand from the table and kissed his knuckles. You were perfect, by the way. They sat watching the pandemonium below, Shax humming softly to himself until Julian caught the tune. Shax, darling. Stop humming, secret agent man. And that's it from me.
Okay, so I guess it's over to me then. I am going to be reading from River City, and that was awesome, by the way, Angel. I'm going to be reading River City. I've got my magical den here, and I want to show you a little trick. Ooh. So this is the River City Chronicles. This was not actually a romance. We'll talk maybe a little bit about the difference later. I was not clear when I first started writing, but there is romance, and then there are books that have romances in them that are not romances because the romance is not the main plot of the book. But this does have a lot of romance in it, and this chapter I was reading from is a very kind of sweet and romantic chapter. It's called Rice and Roses. Dave checked the Spanish rice. It was never as good as when his mother made it. She had a true gift in the kitchen. A pinch of this, a spoonful of that, and the recipes always came out the same, and always delicious. The calabacitas, as his mother called the cheesy zucchini soup she made, were almost ready, and the chile verde, his favorite of all her dishes, was practically falling to pieces. He had cheated on the tortillas, picking up a bag of Michaela's from Nugget. They were just about as good as the real thing, and a hell of a lot less messy. It had been ages since he'd cooked for someone else, but it had come back to him as easily as if he'd been preparing banquets all year long. His mother would be proud. For dessert, he'd prepared something decidedly not Mexican, an angel food cake topped with a slathering of whipped cream, strawberries, and bananas. It wasn't traditional, but it was a family tradition. Maybe he was overdoing it. With his luck, which was almost always bad, he'd scare Marcos away with his overabundant table. Still, better to be who he was than pretend to be something else. Marcos pulled into the driveway of Dave's place, a cute little brick and wood slat bungalow painted a cheery yellow. It was just around the corner from Carmelina's. He parked the Prius and got out of the car, grabbing a bundle of red roses and a bottle of wine from the front seat. He waved at a man and a woman going by on bikes. They waved back and were followed in quick succession by a young boy with a dog, a father trailing 3 little girls, and a green Carmen Ghia roaring by from the other direction. It was just like that old movie, The Truman Show, where the kid grew up on TV in this weird dome thing, and the same 6 set of people circled by in a loop in front of his window, over and over. Marcos waited a moment to see if the couple on the bikes came back around. No such luck. He shook his head and went to knock on the door. Dave opened it, flashing him a big grin. Hi. Hey there. He kissed Dave's cheek. Nice apron. It was a statue of David from Florence. Dave glanced down at David's tiny little cock. Well, that's unfortunate. He grinned again. Come on in. Marcos followed Dave inside the house. The place was cozy. The walls were painted a nice Tuscan gold, and candles flickered all around the room. Very nice, and it smells heavenly in here. Oh, these are for you. He handed Dave the bouquet. They're beautiful. Dave took a deep breath of their perfume. Come in the kitchen. I'll put them in some water. The kitchen was old, with white cabinets and white tile and white grout. Sorry, the landlady hasn't redone the kitchen yet. Carmelina? Dave laughed. He had a beautiful laugh. I keep telling her it's not a big deal. I'm only here for a little while. He sighed. At least that's what I thought 5 years ago. Marcos glanced down at the linoleum floors. Uh-huh. Anything I can do to help? Dave was trimming the rose stems. He plopped them into a glass vase full of water and handed it to Dave. Want to take them out to the dining area and put them on the table? I think we're about ready to eat. Marcos did as he was told. A seemingly endless selection of Mexican dishes followed. Chili verde, rice, some kind of zucchini soup, tortillas, chips, fresh-made pico de gallo, guacamole. Hey, are we expecting other guests or something? He asked, eyeing all the food. Dave stopped, a bowl of refried beans in his hands, and blushed. It's too much, isn't it? Marcos laughed and shook his head. Not at all. It's just a lot of food. Have a seat. Dave put the beans down on the table. It's my mother's fault. It's just how she is. You stop by her house and she says, sit down, I'll make you a little something. And next thing you know, it's Mexican dinner for 6. Marcos sat. My mother was the same way. She was constitutionally incapable of cooking a meal for less than 8 people. Was? Oh, Marcos, I'm so sorry. Oh, no, not like that, Marcos grinned. She lives in Palm Springs now, and she and my dad have a chef who cooks for them most of the time. Now she only goes into the kitchen on holidays when the family gets together. Ah, got it. Go ahead, get started. Dave gestured at the food. You're probably starving. Marcos was. It had been a long day. He scooped up some rice and beans and a helping of chili verde. He took some of the salsa too. He used a tortilla to scoop up a bit of each thing. Damn, this is good, he said through a full mouth. Dave wrapped his own food up burrito style and wolfed it down. The soup is amazing. He fished out a spoonful of broth and zucchini and cheesy gooey goodness. It's called calabacitas, one of Mom's specialties. She must be a great cook. There was something else he wanted to say, but he was a little scared to bring it up. I've been thinking about you. A lot, Marcos said at last, afraid to look at Dave lest he be disappointed by his response. Me too. Marcos looked up. Maybe we could take things a little farther? Dave's face lit up. Yeah, he reached out and touched Marcos's hand. I'd like that. He glanced at all the food. This will keep for a bit. Knock, knock, knock. Dave laughed. Foiled again. Just a sec. I'll go get rid of whoever it is. He jumped up and ran to open the front door while Marcos took another bite. You need to keep up his stamina, after all. I'm so sorry to bother you. Marcos knew that voice. Not at all, Dave said. Come in. Carmeline entered the house. Marcos could see she'd been crying, even from a distance. Her gaze registered the candles and the table. You guys are on a date, aren't you? I'm interrupting you. I'm so sorry. I'll talk to you later. She started to leave. Dave looked at Marcos, who nodded. Don't be ridiculous. Come sit with us. We have plenty of food. She sniffed. Are you sure? I don't want to be a pest. Dave nodded and guided her to the table. Here, have a seat. I'll get you some water. Thanks. Soon they were all together around the table. Now, Dave said, putting his hand on Carmelina's, tell us what happened. As she began to recount what she'd discovered earlier in the day, Marcos turned to look at Dave. He was fully engaged with their friend, the look on his face a mixture of care and true concern. He'd set everything aside in an instant to help a friend in need. That was the moment, Marcos would realize much later, that he started to fall in love. That's it for me. Thank you. So we're going to hand it off now to Amy Lane. Amy is one of our neighbors here also in Sacramento. And Amy, take it away.
Hey. Oh, I always love listening to other people's stories. I get all wrapped up. I am reading today from Shades of Henry. Let's see. Can we see that? No, nobody can see it, right? Yeah. Shades of Henry, you can find it at pretty much any book vendor. The cover's really awesome. Half naked guys, always nice. And I took the title of our thing seriously. This is the meet cute. This is when the two guys meet. And a little bit of background. Henry is well, we find out who Henry is. This is from Lance's point of view. Lance has worked his way through porn, or worked his way through med school in porn. and he's found kind of a impromptu family in this little flop house where the guys who work in the same place all work. But he's a bit older. He's probably ready to get out of the game, but he doesn't want to lose his family. And this is about where he's at when there is a knock at the door. Here in apartment 126C, Lance pretty much had sex on tap, but he hadn't been interested in anyone for over a year. And even then, those two guys were better together than they'd ever been with him. He'd been their pity fuck, both of them. And other than that, well, it was a good thing he filmed a scene about every 6 weeks, wasn't it? He was officially too old for this shit, but he had no intention of growing up in the near future, and that was depressing the hell out of him. Jesus, was it so hard to fix his life so he could find a guy of his own? He had just settled down to his work, finally, when a knock at the door jerked him out of his concentration. He looked up to see one roommate lying on the bed across from his, and another roommate sitting naked on his face. Their sex sounds were muffled in each other's flesh. Damn. He really had gotten used to blocking things out, hadn't he? Lance! Dex called from the landing. Lance! I've got someone here for you to meet. Could you make sure nobody's naked in the living room? Lance looked at Billy and Randy again, his libido waking up in a big way. He probably wouldn't have participated. He'd been avoiding sleeping with the Flophouse guys because, oh my God, who needed the drama? But voyeurism was very, very acceptable here, and he could have given himself a big favor watching that. As it was, he grunted, stood up, and left the bedroom, then padded out into the living room and checked the door to the other bedroom. He heard very specific noises coming from there too, and sighed. What? Was sex in the afternoon a thing now and nobody had passed him the memo? Coming! He called, opening the door. I'm on my way, but I can't make promises about the nake. It wasn't just his boss out there. Ed? Standing next to Dex, who was rangy and blonde and tall and built and constantly flashing dimples because he liked to smile, was a shorter, stockier version of Dex. This guy had the same color hair and the same color eyes, but his jawline was squarer. He had slightly less neck, narrower shoulders, and more attitude. He was built too, but his muscle looked like they'd seen some hard use. Everything about this not Dex screamed military, and Lance wrinkled his nose in distaste. He really wasn't that great with authority. Hi, Dex. Hi, Dex's twin brother. The newcomer rolled his eyes. Hi, porn star, he sneered. Lance recoiled, surprised, and Dex smacked the guy in the back of the head. Damn it, Henry. It's this or living in our garage. Take your pick. Sorry, Henry muttered, rubbing the back of his head. Then, to his credit, he met Lance's eyes and managed to look a little ashamed. I'm sorry. I'm an asshole. This is a bad idea all around. I've got a little bit of savings. Did I show you the cost of living around here? Dex said sweetly. We spent a couple of hours on it, remember? If you could manage not to piss my husband off with every sentence, the garage might actually work. But you can't, so mind your mouth. Remember, 5 guys besides Lance live here. They're all gay, and they all do the same thing for a living. You may be built, but I'm pretty sure if they all gang up, you'd be history, and I could help them hide the body. Lance held his hand up in front of his mouth, so Dex's little brother, it had to be a little brother, wouldn't see him smirking. Henry closed his eyes and opened them again, and this time, when he looked at Lance, he seemed to see a human being. I really am sorry, he said. I'm afraid I'm not very, what's the word? He looked at his brother in earnest supplication. Progressive? Dex offered. Yeah, I'm not very progressive. I'm going to try not to be an asshole and likely fail a lot. If you could, I don't know, don't kill me in my sleep and maybe give me some pointers, I'd be grateful. Lance put everything they were saying together. Wait, don't kill you in your sleep? Does that mean you're going to be sleeping here? Please, Dex said, pinching the bridge of his nose. He'll pitch in for the rent, and in spite of being an asshole of the first order, he'll be helpful. Kane, John, and I can lend him our cars so he can help you guys out? Because I know only like one of you has a car, and he can help with the plumbing and help the guys fill out their student loan applications. Oh God, Lance muttered. That deadline is coming. It was practically the reason their kitchen table had been invented. The last 3 years, they made a party out of it, inviting the other students they knew from Johnny's, with everyone bringing their shit and their laptops and their forms. One of the most interesting things that had happened was Lance had learned everybody's real names, which was another reason he'd stopped having sex with his roommates. He knew them as people now. Dex nodded. See, he can be useful, and he'll be running errands for John and me until he can get his shit together. Understood, Lance said. A loud groan issued from his room, and he grimaced. His 2 roommates were apparently reaching climax. There was a stack of shoes in the entryway because it was wet outside. Nobody wanted to track mud in. Lance slid his feet into a pair of loafers that might have been his and reached for the coat hook for a hoodie that was definitely not. Here, Henry, is that your stuff? Henry slid the military duffel off his shoulders. Yeah, should we come in? No, definitely not. Give me that, and you and me can take a walk around the apartment complex, and I can explain shit, okay? Yes, yes, yes! And that came from the room next to them, where the other 2 roommates, at least Lance assumed that was who it was, were. The fact was that Johnny's guys got tested regularly, and they knew one another. There was a lot of fucking around in-house because they could trust that their partner had a clear health screen. The other guy definitely knew the score, so no strings attached meant no strings attached. And they tended to be friends before, during, and after. So who knew who was naked in the other room? Which was sort of what Lance needed to talk to Henry about. Henry's blue eyes, the same shade as his brother's, but not as guileless or as innocent, had opened wide. Are there, is anybody in the, yes, and yes, Lance said bluntly. Now give me your duffel, say goodbye to your brother, and you and me need to have a little talk. Lance grabbed the duffel and threw it directly onto the couch, checked the pocket of his sweats to make sure his keys were in there, and shut the door behind them. Together, the 3 of them clattered down the stairs, Dex apologizing the whole time. Lance, I'm so sorry. This shouldn't last long. Man, I really appreciate... Stop, Lance laughed as they got to the bottom of the stairs. It's all good, brother. You do the same for any one of us. And you have, which is how we ended up here. Dex shrugged. Yeah, but he's no Bobby. Oh, gods. Bobby, the big young country boy with a solid heart. That pity fuck Lance had given him had left a lasting impression, actually. When Bobby and his boyfriend had gotten their shit sorted, Lance had needed to stomp hard on his own regret. Sort of like with Dex. He'd been so focused on his future, he hadn't moved in on a possible here and now. Well, Bobby still stops by to check on the guys, Lance said. Gives them piecework with his construction firm if they need it. He looked briefly at Henry. You could probably take some of those jobs to tide you over. Henry looked interested. Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Oh, this question was a little personal. I take it you won't be filming scenes? The horror on Henry's square-jawed face spoke volumes, and Lance tried hard not to be hurt. Well, Dex was buckets full of awesome. He was allowed to have a redneck family member who wore his ass for a hat. Dex let out an unamused sound. No scenes for Henry. Unexpectedly, he put his hand on his brother's shoulder and squeezed. And probably no relationships until he gets himself sorted out. Henry shifted uncomfortably and then broke Lance's heart a little by biting his lip, the expression making him look about 15 years younger and vulnerable as hell. No, Henry said gruffly. Probably not. Lance nodded, hopefully looking confident, but inside he was a little confused. He'd assumed Henry was straight. His posture, his judgy sneer, his horror when he'd realized what was going on inside the apartment, all of it had pointed to a straight guy thrown into his worst nightmare. But this sadness, this discomfort, this wasn't the judgment of someone who didn't want to join the party. This was the judgment of someone who'd assumed the party wasn't for them. Looking at Henry's extreme unhappiness and the self-loathing that seemed to radiate off him like sound waves, Lance thought he might be only a little right. Maybe this party wasn't for Henry. but there might be some guy out there who'd throw him a hell of a happily ever after. And that's the end.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, so Kim or me, you want to take this, or?
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, so we want to thank everybody that came to listen. We're going to go ahead and have a little discussion session about romance and kind of why it's important right now and kind of why we do it, how we came to it. So we had come up with a few questions since we're not doing an official question and answer session. And Amy, make sure you unmute so you can participate. So the first question we had come up with was, why is romance so important during these rough times? So you want to take it first? Kim?
Okay. Okay.
Oh, Kim, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's important because, you know, the one key feature of romance is it's got a happy ending. That's the one thing we can all be guaranteed. And, you know, when times are rough, it's nice to be assured of that there's going to be a happy ending, no matter what kind of misery we put people through. Some of us put our characters through a fair amount of misery before we get there, but we know that's going to come, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, romance is really a fantasy kind of world that we create for the reader, and like you said, there's always these kind of challenges and things you have to go through, but there is that hopefulness to it. And I think right now everybody's craving a bit of hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I teach a class on world building, and one of the points to the class is that even if you're writing contemporary anything, you still have to build a world, and you still have to choose what details you're going to end up with. My daughter read a contemporary book in which she said that it was the biggest fantasy she'd ever read, because this woman had a job as a party clown and could afford an apartment in Manhattan and health insurance.
Yes.
And if we're going to, if we're going to pick the details, if we're going to build worlds and write essentially speculative fiction in a contemporary setting, why we're speculating that the world can be a better place. We're speculating that people can be happy. We're speculating that we can change the world enough that two people who they might have some difficulties, that they can eventually find, you know, joy together. And I mean, there's all sorts of dystopian literature. I don't see why we shouldn't speculate and make a case for being able to work for something better.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Angel?
I mean, romance is it's a construct. Romance is a very specific construct that we all understand. Readers of romance know what they're coming into when they're reading a romance. There are expectations, and that expectation is that everything is going to be okay. And when we're in times of extreme difficulty and extreme uncertainty, which is where we are now, people need this. It's a really important thing to remind themselves that, yeah, stuff gets bad, but eventually everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, I always think of romance, and Angel probably hate this, but think of it as like a Starbucks. Like you go to Starbucks no matter where you go in the world, and you know you're going to get a Frappuccino. So with romance, it's a certain comfort thing. You know the product you're going to get. You know it's going to meet certain things that you want. And so, you know, yeah, if you went out and you got a local restaurant, you might get like a high literary book that you didn't really get that same thing from, or you might get a sci-fi book that is a whole different plot structure. But with romance, you always know that you're going to get that kind of fantasy and that beauty and that romance.
And there's, you know, every genre has its genre expectations.
Yeah.
Fiction, fantasy have expectations for those. Horror, you know, someone's gonna die. You know, and any genre has, and I know readers will say things like, if in a review or if they're talking about a book, that ticked all my boxes. there's nothing wrong with ticking all those boxes. It means you gave your reader that thing that they wanted the most. When they picked that book up, they went, I need a Frappuccino. I need an iced coffee that tastes exactly like this. And if you give them that, you've done your job. You know?
Is that kicking the boxes? Is that what the kids are calling it these days?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
But that's, you know, when we're trained to think about fiction in an academic setting, we're trained to look at certain things, and very often those things are not things that make anybody happy. We're looking at, you know, nihilism, we're looking at existentialism, and we're looking at, you know, these horrible gray places that the human brain can go. And it's just, you know, there is nothing wrong with wanting a story that makes you feel better.
Mhm.
Right.
I mean, I think that's one of the best things that we can possibly do as authors, is offer a story that's going to make you, in the end, feel better instead of worse as you read it.
One of the things about romance is if it's a good romance, if it's working, by definition, the reader is emotionally involved in it, and emotionally involved in these, you know, these wonderful highs and sometimes some lows, and then this payoff at the end. And that's a really great way to escape, in some cases, from stuff that's going on in life. And while other literature, you may or may not be emotionally involved, you know you're going to get that positive payoff in romance, at least at the end.
Agreed. So let's go a little personal here. Let's start with Amy. So what brought you to romance as a genre? How did you get started writing romance?
Through the back ass end. I did everything else.
Appropriate.
I started out writing urban fantasy. And I called it vampire romance because I did not know any better. This is 15 years ago, before people really started talking about why romance, and romance really started, you know, banging the table and going, me too, were important too. And I did the unmentionable thing. I killed off the protagonist at the end of that book. I had people yell at me. I still have people yelling at me. You did what? Like, I'm sorry, it's only happened 1 or 2 times since.
You blew him up, Amy.
I did. I disintegrated him. And the more I wrote, and the more I wrote, and I was good. I love the epic fantasies. I love the urban fantasies with the painful ending that was not all great. And then I saw actually it was a prompt on Twitter, and it was from it was from Lynn West, and she and Elizabeth wanted to see they're like, we want to see a ficlet to this commercial. And I don't know if anybody remembers this commercial. It was the Kettle One vodka commercial. And it was done in black and white. And it had guys in tuxedos sitting across from each other at a poker table. And it was supposed to be guys' night out. And my brain just went, oh, hey, that's really nice. I'd like to see the happy ending to that guy's night out. And I wrote about 750 words. And sent it to Lynn, and I already knew what Dreamspinner, the publisher, sold, and I liked it. I'd read a lot of it, and they said, please write for us. And I went, now wouldn't it be nice if they didn't have to die in the end? Wouldn't it be nice if the books didn't have to be 200,000 words, because that's where I was at. Wouldn't it be nice if I could, you know, if there could be some unashamed joy in the course of the book? And it was a no-brainer. You just start writing romance. I'd grown up reading Harlequins and the giant fantasy toons, and it was time to write the happy. Just was.
Okay. Angel, how about you? How did you get started?
Well, mine is kind of backwards from me in a way. I've been writing science fiction. It was not selling. I was having a lot of trouble finding somebody to publish it. So I had started going to critique groups, and every single other person in these critique groups was writing romance. So for the first time in my life, I started reading romance, and quite frankly, because they were critique groups, it was a lot of really bad romance. But I started getting interested in the structure and in how romances work. So I started to review for different websites romances. And I figured out that I liked them. I mean, from where I'm coming from the family background, unfortunately, romances were not something that you read. This is something, that nobody ever would talk about if you read a romance. It was really looked down on. So it took me a while to get over that kind of ingrained prejudice, which is really awful, this literary snobbery. And I figured out that yes, I liked them. And after, kind of studying them for a while as a reviewer, I decided that I wanted to write them too, because yeah, you want the happy ending. You want to have a story that has lots of other things in it, maybe, but that has this romance as its core, this connection between two people that's just the most special thing in the universe, really.
Awesome. Kim, how about you?
I came also at it accidentally. I was never much of a romance reader. I think I had a very narrow idea of what romance was. I thought of it, as the sort of bodice ripper, and I guess I never really identified much with the characters. I don't know any dukes, and I probably never will. And what I was reading was a lot of speculative fiction, and I used to write short stories, and I would inflict them on my family, but nobody else. And I had this idea in my head that there's no way I could possibly write a novel. And then I discovered fan fiction. And first I was reading fan fiction, and then I started writing fan fiction. And this is actually a funny story, because I started spending a fair amount of time on it, and I would go off into my study and start writing, and my husband thought I was having an online affair, which I didn't know at the time. But what I was doing was writing fan fiction, specifically slash fan fiction. So it was in the Buffy universe, between Spike and basically everybody male. And the thing about it is I got all this feedback and all this wonderful practice at things like writing dialogue and building characters and all that. And also, one of my very first fan fictions was over 100,000 words, which is the length of a long novel. And I realized, maybe I could write a novel. And so I started thinking about it. And then I learned about National Novel Writing Month. And I kind of, you're supposed to write a 50,000 word novel in the month of November, which sounds impossible, but it turns out it's not. And I wrote my first nano novel, and although it's primarily a fantasy, there's definitely a romantic element, and that got me into it. And along the way, I discovered that romance as a genre was a lot broader than I had expected, and the blinders kind of came off my eyes, and I realized how much room there is to do all sorts of really wonderful things with all sorts of characters in it.
That was the Enoch trilogy, right?
That was the Enoch trilogy, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic book. And can you explain for people who might not know what slash fiction is?
Slash fiction is basically two men together. And I think the term goes all the way back to some of the first fan fiction that was written. The first slash fan fiction was in the Star Trek universe, and they would write it as Spock slash Captain Kirk, so that you knew who the pairing was. And so slash came to be shorthand for two male characters together. So now when people say slash fan fiction, they're referring primarily to gay male fan fiction.
When I first heard that term, I thought it was like a thriller, murdery kind of thing.
Right.
So for me, okay.
Also where that came from is came from the tags on fan fiction.
Okay. So for me, it was kind of similar. I kind of fell into it through the back door. I was always a sci-fi and fantasy fan growing up. My mom was the charter member of the science fiction book club and had this huge shelf of books. And I went through McCaffrey and Asimov and Heinlein and all these other authors when I was a kid. I had always wanted to write, and I started writing in my 20s. I gave up when my first book was rejected by a bunch of publishers and didn't come back to it until I was in my mid-40s. That was about 6 years ago now. And my husband, Mark, was an avid romance reader. I was reading gay romance. And so when I was getting ready to try again, I realized he knew all these publishers that did this gay romance thing, which hadn't really even existed when I had been writing previously. So I decided to go ahead and give it a try, and wrote a bunch of short stories and sent them out, and ended up having one of them published in an anthology called A Taste of Honey. It's basically a Freaky Friday for bears. Bears being, big gay guys. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. And my love has always kind of been sci-fi fantasy, and I have written a lot of stuff that is either in the romance side with sci-fi fantasy, and also some stuff that is general sci-fi fantasy with sometimes romance in it or relationships and things. But so that's kind of how I fell into it. Why don't we do one more question before we go? We had one: why does romance lend itself to adaptation in all subgenres? And I think Angel is the queen of all subgenres. That'd be a good one to start with this one.
Well, it's really the fact that humans are humans, no matter where you put them. And when you look at other subgenres like science, like various fantasies, like paranormal stories, you have humans in these stories, and most really good stories have some kind of a romance at their core, because it's people connecting, and that can happen in any kind of story. So whether you're out in space, or whether you're out on the range with your horses, or whether you're solving a mystery, all of these things can still have as a major plot point two people connecting in the what's happening in the rest of the world in their lives. So yes, space battles and dragons and slaying gorgons and whatever it is, does not preclude two people falling in love.
Agreed. Now, Amy, the first book, romance book I ever read, and it was a sci-fi romance book, was one of yours, and it was Alpha. Help me with the whole title.
Solid Core of Alpha.
Amy?
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. And so tell me how that is a romance and how you use romance in those kind of spaces. Oh, you're muted, Amy. There you go.
Okay, sorry, I had to mute myself because the food dinner got here and the dogs went nuts. So, okay, Solid Core of Alpha was science fiction, and like Angel and Kim and actually everybody, I guess, sci-fi fantasy was my original, my original love. And for me, the one thing that I always found was that was lacking in my science fiction and in my fantasy was that human emotional connection. It was, I was always like, I want a little less world building, a little less strategy of how we're going to take over this planet or this country, and a little more these two people looking at each other longingly and what they're going to say to each other in private. So when I wrote Alpha, what I decided to do was use the idea of space travel and the idea of technological advancement and see what it did to us as human beings. So Anderson, who is 10 or 12 at the beginning of the book, ends up locked in a spaceship with only his own holographic creations for company for 10 years. And he essentially spends 10 years talking to himself. And I wanted to know what that would do to a person. And short answer, that fucked him up.
Yes.
Yes, but long answer, how does one come back to that and make an honest to God, real human connection? For me, it all comes down to human connection. It comes down to that individual one-on-one, and it doesn't have to be sexual, although I like romance because it does have the sex, and the sex is fun. Sex is sex, and touch can be a very joyful part of being human. But I also like romance because it has that intense, how do these two very specific, very unique human beings fit? How do we recover from our damage? How do we become a person who can trust enough to say, yes, I will put my emotions in your hands. So to juxtapose that with what any genre, what fantasy, what science fiction, I've written them all, what fairy tales, what, setting something back in history can do. It's all exploring what it means to be human, and no matter what the circumstances.
So you both basically said it's because people are people and people like reading about people. So Kim, disagree with that.
I'm afraid I'm not going to disagree with that, but I'm going to add a twist to it, which is that it's not just that people are people and that, the love is this universal, but from an author standpoint, and I think from a reader standpoint, romance offers us these wonderful opportunities for creativity as we cross genres. I have a novella that's set in 15th century Bosnia. I'm pretty sure that is the only gay romance novella. I think that is the literature, gay romance literature of 15th century Bosnia.
That's the whole shelf.
Story. Yeah, that's it. But when you do something like that, or you're on another planet, or you've got dragons, or whatever you've got, it gives you this wonderful creative way to think about how this universal of love plays out in a lot of different times and places and species, and and how those factors, how we find these universalities among all these variables. And I think that's really fun. It's a playground from an author standpoint and from a reader standpoint too.
Yeah, I think for mine, I've written, again, kind of stuff that is solidly romance, and there's some stuff that is arguably romance, arguably science fiction, stuff that falls on the other side. But I think romance, it is that real solid core of Alpha, a solid core of the relationship. It's a building block. Just like the tropes you can use in romance or tropes you can use in different things. It's a piece that you can put into a story, or that can be the story that really gives you, like you guys have said, that solid human character, that human connection. Pretty much everybody wants love, whether you are, even if you're aromantic people, or asexual people, or bisexual people, transgender, intersex, gay, etc. But everybody wants that human connection by and large. They want someone to recognize them, to see them, to know who they are. And so I think that there is a universality that, as a sci-fi author, is very helpful at times to kind of ground my story, to have that in the middle of the story, or to be the story. So yeah. All right, so I think we're about done for the night. You guys did awesome. The readings were fantastic. I mean, mine was so-so, but you guys were great.
You're always wonderful, Scott.
So thank you very much for getting us all together, Kim. This is a great idea. Had a lot of fun.
I want to thank the panelists. You guys did a wonderful job despite some technical glitches. And again, tune in to Litquake for the rest of our Litquake on Lockdown series, and donate at Venmo if you so choose. And keep washing your hands and staying safe. And
Yes.
thank you, Kim, Angel, Scott, and Amy for such a great panel. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a great
Have a
time.
good night, you guys.
Right.
Okay, bye-bye.